Hey everybody, welcome back to the NC State Insider Podcast. I'm your host and lead beat writer for NC State on SI, Tucker Sennett. Happy to be covering the Wolfpack 2-0 after the win over Virginia, a 35-31 win in a shootout at Carter-Finley Stadium. Off to a great start in year 13 under Dave Doran. Um, Wolfpack continued to show a lot of impressive stuff on offense, but today's about the sights and sounds. So I'll just give you sort of my feel like I did last week on being in the stadium, being in the press box, what I saw that you might have missed if you weren't there or you were watching on TV. It was a hot, hot day in Raleigh yesterday. It was the talk of the broadcast. It was the talk of Doran during the game, after the game, and you could really see, in those on the field interviews and even, in the press box, people were toasty yesterday. And I think personally, I noticed that early that was going to have an effect on both teams. And I think particularly on the defensive side of the ball, those guys were really struggling to make tackles in the first half for NC State and in the second half for Virginia. And that just allowed some of those big holes to open up for the both teams' rushing attacks, which had massive days. You had Jamari Taylor for Virginia finishing with 3 touchdowns, including that 66-yard explosive, and Hollywood Smothers with two of his own who just dominated in that third quarter. So the heat was real. Doran talked about it after the game. He said, there were concerns for fans. NC State actually tweeted like where the water refill stations around the stadium were because they were worried that people were gonna get blasted by that sun and that humidity. And it was hot. I think it peaked at around 90 degrees during game time, and the sun was there's not a lot of shade to hide in at Carter Finley. So it was not to make excuses for the defensive effort yesterday, but it was seriously hot for down here in September, which can happen, but it certainly had an effect, in my opinion, on the play. Um, Obviously, there's larger issues, but we'll get into that a little more when we kind of analyze this game further. Um, CJ Bailey, the sophomore quarterback, just looks so much more poised than he did a year ago. And obviously, I wasn't here covering the team every day, so I didn't see, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff or watch him consistently. But in my research and going back and watching him last year and even week to week this year, I know it's only been 2 games, but he looks like a totally different quarterback both weeks. Last week, he had that great first half, and then he sort of fizzled, and it looked like that was happening again in the second quarter of this game after he came out firing with that 30-yard touchdown run and that beautiful, beautiful ball, which I'll talk about later, to Noah Rogers. But he came out of that halftime locker room and locked right back in, leaned on Hollywood Smothers, which was a topic that we hammered so hard during the offseason. Having that extra help in the backfield will really help him. And it obviously did yesterday because he was able to sort of survey the field on his throws and then know that if it didn't work out, he could either dump it off to Smothers or the next play they were going to get 3 or 4 yards or on a couple cases more, including a 57-yard explosive by Smothers in the third quarter. So I think, his poise, his leadership, all things that have been hammered home by this NC State sort of media cycle and program. I think, while we can't jump to conclusions, it's certainly looking good. It's looking real. Um, so it's something to monitor for sure. Back to the Heat a little bit. I think a big part of Hollywood Smothers' third quarter was that the offensive line had a chance to catch its breath. They stormed out of the gate. They had some quick drives, and then UVA was kind of going up and down the field pretty fast. So the offensive line was normally the defense would be gassed by the offense, going down and scoring quickly. I think the offensive line, suffered a little bit from the pace of the game, and they didn't get the same push that they had in that third quarter in the first half, and they made some really good adjustments. And Kurt Roper called a really good game. This offense doesn't look anything like it did a year ago. They push the ball down the field. It's not Jolie catching screen passes or Kevin Concepcion catching screen passes and just pounding the rock with Smothers when that doesn't work. There's some nuance to it. There's balance. Bailey's legs are such an asset, and Doran talked about that after the game. But yeah, I mean that was a major takeaway for me. And then another aspect of the you know the flip side of that was the third down defense by the Wolfpack was atrocious. And no, I will not make excuses for that. I mean, DJ Elliott talked during the week about the percentages that they want. That I think the number he mentioned was 70% on third and long. There were a lot of third and long situations, and Virginia. Let me get the stat here for you, but um, Virginia on third down was, of course, I can't find it when I actually need it. Um, Virginia on third down was 13 of 19. And one of those misses on the fourth down play ended up being a touchdown rush. From not, we're not talking in the red zone. It was like a 30-yard touchdown rush. So they got to really clean that up because, the offenses are only going to get better from here on out. You got Wake Forest next week on Thursday, which is a short week, but that's a winnable game. But after that, you got Duke, who's going to be reeling after that Illinois loss, and Florida State scored 77 points. That's later in the season. Miami with Beck, they could carve that third down defense up. So it was worse than it looked on TV. I'll put it that way. There's some serious problems. The linebacker play was, in a word, poor. Um, and Fordham and Brown, as much as their leadership and second half performance made up for a lot of the mistakes, they were really, really struggling to tackle in the first half, which was just so surprising after that week one performance where they held the ECU to 30 rushing yards. And it was the passing attack that really harmed them. And yesterday it was not that. It was sort of a pretty ugly showing on the ground. And Tony Elliott does a lot of good things, a lot of experience coming from Clemson. But this was a game you had to win, and the defense certainly did not put themselves in a position to get that win until Kean Sloan made a hero ball play at the end of the game. Back to that Bailey touchdown pass to Noah Rogers. I saw it on the TV broadcast when I went back and rewatched most of the NC State scoring drives. Another thing to note is the red zone offense was a massive improvement, but we'll talk about that in another episode. Um, that Bailey pass, as it happened, from the press box view, that was a professional throw, and I mean, I've watched some really solid quarterback play in my short journalism career. I'm not going to pretend to have seen anything super impressive, but I've watched Caleb Williams, I've watched Quinn Ewers. I spent a lot of time watching Sam Levitt, a guy who was supposed to be a Heisman candidate this year and has sort of struggled out of the gate, but a good quarterback. And I've seen what high-level college football quarterbacks look like, and that rope by Bailey to Rodgers was pretty one of the better throws I've seen. I mean, it was just perfectly placed over the outstretched arms of the linebacker, nestled right into Rodgers on that same, basically the same post concept that they ran to Wesley Grimes a week ago for a touchdown. It's just a little more condensed in terms of where they were on the field. And unbelievable, like really, really, really crazy stuff for a sophomore. We're not there yet where we're going to anoint him as a, you know, top tier quarterback in the country, but he's certainly making a case, especially with the stuff on the ground too. We're moving in that direction. And if the ACC continues to sort of crumble like it did yesterday, we could be talking about Bailey being, a top quarterback in this conference, which I think he was undervalued going into the season, but I didn't expect this level of jump. And we're only through 2 games. The wheels could come off the bus at any moment, but I just wanted to point out how impressive that touchdown pass was. The last play, I got some messages and saw some people saying that there were Virginia players open and Morris missed on that play and NC State should have lost, yada, yada, yada. He rolled to his right and essentially on that mesh concept that they ran the whole game, gave up the stuff over the middle because, he'd be throwing across his body for you know, he'd be throwing through NC State defenders. Morris is a good quarterback. This Virginia team is massively improved from a year ago. They have guys for sure, and he's a gunslinger. He's a gamer. They're going to win some games. He was not making that throw, and if he makes a better throw over Sloan, Taylor has a chance to win the game there, because he did have half a step throw to a running back over the arms of a much bigger defender. Maybe 4 college quarterbacks are making that throw on the run. Maybe even 3. I don't know. But he was not making any of those throws. If he were, you know, trying to win that game, or if he weren't trying to just win that game on that play, he would have thrown it away. He didn't. Sloan jumps up, makes the pick, hero ball. NC State moves to 2-0. Virginia's 1-1. It sounded like Tony Elliott was frustrated after the game. I'm sure he was frustrated by that play because there was no need to do that, and it was they had plenty of opportunities. They had a chance to get another first down, and Morris just pushed it. And we talked a lot about that throughout the week. He's a gambler, and he proved that today. There were more throws that certainly could have been turnovers if this NC State second secondary was able to make a play, and they just couldn't come up with it. But yeah, that was certainly something that stuck out to me. I think in terms of people's feelings about the win, I think there's certainly a camp who are happy that the team is 2-0 for the first time since 2022, but this is a schedule that only gets harder. And I think there's definitely some concerns about what this team is in the long run, particularly defensively. I think the offense is massively improved, but based on social media and obviously there's, you know, a lot of armchair Monday morning, or I guess Sunday morning quarterbacks on X and Facebook, and I think um, you know there's those guys can say a lot of things, and Doran can say that people like to get on the negativity wagon, and it's just going to be a back and forth for most of the season, depending on how these games go. I think this Wake Forest game is going to be a nice test on the road against a team that's really, really. struggling in its kind of rebuild. Um, and if NC State can go in there and take care of business, especially offensively, um, I think there'll be some confidence about this team moving forward. That's kind of the basic sights and sounds, takeaways, early takeaways from that 35-31 victory over Virginia. We'll be back every day throughout this week with more coverage of the win as well as build up to that Wake Forest game on Thursday. Thanks again for tuning in. Looking forward to talking more Wolfpack football with you over the course of the week. You can follow my social media. My X account is at Senate Tucker for stories and analysis. Follow the website's social media at Wolfpack on SI. You can follow the or subscribe to the YouTube channel at Sports Videos on SI for more episodes like this, talking Wolfpack ball, game day reactions, previews, media reactions, press conferences, etc. We got it all right there. Thanks again. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday.